Had my construction classes today. Last thing on Friday, and I didn't mention this on Friday because I'm a little bit miffed about it. My timber delivery arrived at the front of the school instead of at the back. Truck driver just dumped it off in the car park and left, and I found out as I was getting ready to leave. Thankfully there were some students still here having football games out on the oval. They came and helped carry all the timber up to the back of the school to my TAS faculty. And it was big 6 metre long lengths of construction lumber for the construction class. Today's construction class, one of them carried that across from the wood room to the construction compound, and I'm in the construction room right now. And we had it out here, and then I started cutting it up in half because I wanted 3 metre lengths, because that's what fits really well in the front of the workshop. I've got 90 by 35, technically a 2x4 that's been milled down, and 70 by 35, so like 2x3 basically, and that's what they use for one of their other projects. So that's most of it. What couldn't fit in there we put into the racks outside. So this is the little bit of the overflow we've got of the 70 by 35 and a couple of pieces 90 by 35, again in 3 metre length, so they're in this outside rack, but they're underneath, basically undercover. I might put something down the front just to protect it from driving rain. But that's basically what some of them did today, helped out with that. And the timber class, I'll show you their work maybe tomorrow, because it's all locked up now. I'm leaving. No, Max isn't really running again. I'm just getting him to limp down to our mechanics. My wife is following me in the car, and as long as I'm running downhill, he coasts along. As soon as there's anything that requires power, he starts to cough and splutter. When I rang the mechanic, he said, "Sounds like it might be a blown head gasket," which is not welcome news. So I'm going to take him down. They're going to look over him and do a couple of hours worth of investigation. I pay them the labour, and then they'll tell me what they think the issue is, and I guess quote on a cost to repair, and then I can decide whether I want them to do it or I'll just do it on a weekend or something. I've done the head gasket replacements before. It's not that difficult, it's just time consuming, and you've got to take apart the whole top end of the car, whole top end of the engine. So just showing what Year 12 timber students who were here the other day did. This girl was doing the miter joints using the track saw to cut miters so that she can have basically a flow over grain pattern up the legs and across the top. So she got all those done, and with her little hutch on the top. Another student who's doing the epoxy big coffee table, his legs are going to be a little bit of a curve, so he's glued up a few blanks for his 4 legs. I'd gone and bought all this for him at Bunnings, and it was 90 by 35 but non-structural timber, so it's usually a little bit drier, not your standard let's go build a house 2x4 type stuff. I bought him that, and that's the stuff where I picked through the pack to try and find as straight a piece as I could get. We stripped them back to get rid of the rounded edge that they still come with. He's glued those up, so he's got a piece of plywood that he's going to draw the template of his leg onto and trace onto there. We decided to just do a full glue joint rather than doing any alignment things like biscuits or whatever, just in case he cut through a biscuit because he forgot where it was put. The girl who's using the iron bark, she'd set out a couple of her frame pieces and using loose tenons with the domino. So she's got some domino joints cut in the end of the rails and corresponding dominoes in the legs. It's her first time ever using the domino, and first thing she said was, "Looks kind of like the biscuit joint but different." So she got that done. I've got them for 2 hours tomorrow with the recess break in between, so we'll see how they progress tomorrow and on with their work. Prognosis from the mechanics wasn't that great. Possible cracked head rather than just the head gasket. maybe. I stopped there on the way back from work and got him out of their lock-up yard so he wouldn't be locked up overnight. And after dinner, the wife drove me back down to pick up the van, and now we're limping back to the house. It's a little bit of a jerky ride, but we'll get there. It's not pleasant. I feel bad that I've made my wife have to drive out as well. Hill. Yep, no power whatsoever on the hill, and it's jerking around. This is really bad, but we'll get there and make a decision on what to do. Just finished the first hour of the core class with Year 12, and the girl who's doing her hutch used the track saw to do her miters, and then she used the domino to get a bit of extra strength in those corners, and that's just the little hutch part of her desk, which has worked out really well. It's come together a lot better than I was expecting, and that she was expecting too, so that's good. Recess break now, and then we're back in here for another hour. Year 7 boys came out here today and got their first seedlings planted. Looks like parsley to me, I think. They're doing really well. High Spoke class has just finished another lunchtime cafe. It's been really cold and rainy, so we ran down and bought a couple of these gas heater things, or the GA ran down for me because I was on class, so we got a couple of them to heat up the area, because the last thing we wanted to do was to say to people, it's too cold, we don't want to be up in the cafe, because it's all built for that. End of that Year 12 lesson, we got one frame glued up. This is going to be a blanket box, so that's one side of it. Waterfall top table with the domino joints. She got all of those cut, so they're all done, and it all went together well on the dry fit. And the student that was had the leg blanks glued up. This was his plywood template, and he's got a slight curve on his legs so they splay out a little bit. He got all those cut today, so all making progress.
Throw. Everybody go one. Yes. Yay! Cheering. Woo! Yay! Yay! He's delaying, waiting for the robots to stop. That's incredibly important. And thank you so much. All of my volunteers.
Just came down to International Convention Centre at Sydney, where EdVal, our timetabling software, was holding a launch of their brand new software. The new software looks fantastic. It's, as they said, it's moved from a Windows 3.11 look and into the modern age, and it looks fantastic. So they've just done their launch after EduTech, which was held down here today, and I'm kind of excited. Is that sad that I'm excited about brand new timetabling software? I run the timetable for my school. The brand new software looks like it's just a lightning improvement on what is already fantastic software. I asked about when I can get onboarded for it, and they're going to see about getting me on there, and they're rolling it out slowly to make sure they get all the bugs done. But yeah, so this was down in Sydney, down in Darling Harbour. The event's just finished up, and I'm making my way back to the car park so I can take an hour and a half drive back to the house before getting up to go on an excursion to the timber show tomorrow. Sydney Timber Show on an school excursion, just waiting at the train station for my students to arrive so we can catch the train down. So here at the Sydney Timber Show, just spent some time looking at last year's HSC projects. Some of my students are a little bit in awe of those. They're fantastic, the workmanship and the time that goes into some of those. Now I'm going to go and have a bit more of a look around the show, see if I can find Dan Brent. Heading into a long weekend. Just saw the students off after the wood show excursion at the train station. We got back to the train station and that's where we're dismissed. Didn't get out to see the giant mills. There were two companies running mills, but they were only doing it at a certain time, and I'm not even sure if they were doing it today. Didn't look like it because the weather was a little bit inclement. Got through most of the main hall, basically had a look at everything. There were some things that I've seen
over and over and over.
I think it was a good idea that they've actually opened it up and called it the wood, tool, so the timber, tools and artisan show. So there was a lot of variation in there as well, so carving and some artists, that fabric work, pottery. Apparently they're having some blacksmithing things over the weekend as well. They weren't set up for today, which was a little bit of a bummer, but it's good that they've got all these different things happening, kind of broaden the scope of the show, so it was quite good to go to, especially after missing it last year. Really good to finally meet Dan Brent and hang around and have a chat a couple of times. Had a bit of a chat, then went off to look at some extra stuff and then came back, had another long chat. It was really good. The students who went said they got a lot out of it, and that's the main thing. They tried out some of the hands-on displays, which was really good, and that's what you want for them out of the excursion. You want them to basically experience things and have a go at some tools that we might not have in the school, and see projects and folios and basically just work in general from other people, other students, artists, professionals, whatnot, to try and inspire them and spark their interest a little bit further. And I said we've got a long weekend, and then I'll see those students for a double timber class, I think, on Tuesday. It's Sunday, in the middle of the long weekend that we're having at the moment. In the lead up to the weekend, my wife said, you know, Saturday's meant to be yucky and rainy, but we've got appointments to go out to, so that's not too bad. Sunday, Monday meant to be full sun, so I'll be able to get all sorts of stuff done in the yard. So this morning she said to me, weather says it's changed, meant to be yucky tomorrow as well, so better get out there into the yard today. I started getting myself ready, and true to form, which is what she said. Actually, she said you always do this, but true to form, I forgot stuff. In needing to lay the Besser block wall, I actually need a half block, just a square block for the bottom course in the corner, because it's going to start stepping uphill. But I need at least one, so I'm going to get a few for going up that first section of the wall. And when I went and checked supplies for the mortar, I had cement, I had sand, I had no lime. So I'm actually just going to buy some regular mortar bags to save on the hassle of trying to mix up stuff. And I'll just buy pre-mixed mortars, perfect for block building, and just mix that up and go for it. And I started ringing around all the Bunnings that are within Kui. I even rang Mitre 10 in Katoomba.
Valley Heights do not sell the Besser blocks. Katoomba did not have the square ones. The Mitre 10 did not have the square ones in stock. I rang Penrith and said they had over 200, so I go, great, I'm going to have to go all the way down to Penrith, which I don't particularly want to do.
And then I just remembered Landscape Supplies place in Blaxland that I've bought stuff from multiple times. I rang them and they have the square blocks in stock. So I'm going to go straight down there, buy a few of those square blocks and buy some bags of mortar mix. They'll probably have those, and if they don't, Bunnings will have the mortar. I got my blocks and I got 4 bags of mortar mix, just so I've got all that. When I got down there and asked the guy, he took me up to where they have their decorative blocks and he couldn't find any. He goes, "Who did you speak to? It doesn't look like we got any." And I said, "I don't know who I spoke to." Rule 1 that my wife always tells me, get the name of who you spoke to on the phone. I said, whoever, the guy I spoke to said, he ran to check to make sure he had them, and then he came back and I said, "Oh good, I only need a few, how much are they?" And then he ran back to find out the price. And he goes, "Oh, that must be the other guy who's down in the excavator." And we're looking around, and then I look further down the end of the yard and I see the plain Besser blocks on a pallet. So "Is that them down there?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, brain fart." He said. So it was like, we went down there and yeah, they had a pallet and a bit of them, so I only wanted 4 to start with. So I got those, got my mortar, heading back to the house and get started. So it's the new weekend. I've got to remove all the formwork from this. I've got my blocks and I've got little square blocks as well. When I was actually doing some more research online about doing block walls, I've kind of overdone the Rio. Like people who do it professionally have said like every 24 inches. And I've got it basically every 4 to 5. So I'm thinking I might take every second one out. It'll make it easier to lay the blocks. There'll still be one in each block as they overlap, and I'll be able to use those bits going up the sides as well where it's not so tall. So you're getting the grinder out and doing that first. I've got my first row of bricks laid out ready to go. Chalk lines on both sides of the brick, because with blocks, unlike regular bricks, you've just got to put mortar on either side. So I've got those marked out. Now it's just time to mix up my mortar and lay my first course. Mortar needs to be not sloppy, not too dry. Basically, if you go and slap it down and then do up at 90 degrees, it should stay there. And that's a good mix for mortaring. This could probably be just a tiny bit thicker. I want it to basically support the weight of the brick as well. I don't want to do it too sloppy. Hope I'm getting this in frame. Looks like it. That could be good. We'll go start this first course. So I got the first course of the better blocks in, and I've readjusted this line here because it wasn't a right angle. We were basically taking measurements off the landing and the shed, so the wall is the same distance away from the shed all the way along. Going up here, if we kept the wall going the same distance off the landing all the way along, the slab wasn't going to be square, which would cause an issue in this corner. So I've readjusted that point up the top, not that you could see that, and it's about 6 inches closer to the house, maybe, if that, because I kind of mucked up this morning, didn't have these little square blocks, mainly for that end corner, and I didn't have mortar. I didn't really get started till around midday, and even then I had to pull out all the formwork for it first from the pathway and everything. So it's now 9 o'clock at night. I spent some time digging out this footing because I need to make sure that there's a good solid footing for all of the better block wall going up here, and I need to make sure that I've got the blocks a little bit or somewhat below grade, so that when I do this path I can get a good, from that top area there right down to here, I can get a good smooth slope, which means it needs to sort of basically run past the better block. So this, I've got to have one in there at least, and then I'll come up a course and I'll move in a few, I think it's about 3 blocks, then come up another course, then go along, and I think that's about 7 blocks, and then up another course, which will be the 4th 200 course that'll go along. And then I'm thinking I'm going to have a half brick course along the top, which will allow us to have a 2-inch slab sitting on top of the whole wall. So 2 inches around the edges, probably a little bit deeper in the centre. So I've got a little bit more to sort of dig out up there. But I'm stopping now, I think. Don't have enough blocks to do all of that. I think I've only got enough blocks just to do a second course along here. The forecast for tomorrow, as I said earlier, is for rain. I had another look at it. Sun in the morning, rain mid-morning, and then from about 1 o'clock through to sunset, no rain again. So I'm thinking I might be able to actually get some of this course, this first course here, get a concrete footing in and a couple of blocks in, and maybe a couple of blocks along there, and then I've got to fill the hollows of the blocks with concrete. And if it does start to rain, then that's when I'll shoot down to the Bunnings and grab some more blocks. So I know I can get at least 20 in the back of the Suzuki. The van stopped running. That's my plan. But I basically stayed out here digging. I've had to take a break where I was hitting rock and I didn't want to make too much noise. But most of the clay I was able to just basically dig out fairly quietly without making too much noise in the neighbourhood. get back to work tomorrow.
Morning. Out here having a look at what I got dug last night. So I got my footing basically stepping up towards the front of the area. However, my first 390 block needs to come back to at least here, and I encountered some sandstone that's above where I need to have it sit. So I'm going to have to crack at that at least a little bit further past where the brick needs to go, so I can set the block down at the right height and level, because that's the only one that's going here, and then it's going to step up, so it'll be concrete footing there, next row of blocks up above. So that's job number one at the start, so I can end up starting this. That's that job done. There's the sandstone. A few strategically placed holes with the hammer drill, and a bit of whaling with the lump mallet and a cold chisel, and I've managed to crack out that rock so that I can get that block in on a bed of mortar and cement. Okay, so there's the wall so far, and coming back I've got that footing done up so far, so the next layer is going to be concrete there and the next row of blocks. I've stopped with the block laying because I've run out of the blocks that I bought, so I've got to buy more blocks. It hasn't rained, you can still hear the cement mixer turning. I've got a few bags of cement and normal gravel out the front, so I'm going to mix up a bit more cement to basically pour into all these blocks, so I'm not sort of wasting my time here. Initially, my plan for today was to try and do this while I can, and when it rained, run down and get more blocks. It hasn't rained. It's threatened to, but it hasn't. I still need to do some work on the van, because I've got to take the engine head out so I can go and get it tested to see if it is actually cracked. If I was to now go and run down the hill to get more blocks to continue doing this now, I'd be wasting 2 hours. I've got 3.5 bags of cement. I've got all the gravel and sand out the front, so I'm just going to go and mix up a few batches of concrete and fill all those in. And once I've done that, clean that stuff up, go work on the van. I think that's a better use of today's time.
Four o'clock. This is as far as I'm going with this. I basically put some concrete into each block all the way down to the base, even on these ones. Now, I haven't come all the way to the top, because that means that when I put the next course on, when I start to fill that up, the concrete will basically bind between this block and the one on above it. So that's the thought there. I'll come back here and one part of the corner. Gonna go and check on Max the van. Well, I didn't think that was gonna work, but Max started. Even the emergency starter was having trouble kicking him over, but I've got him started. I'm just letting him warm up a little bit, so I might need to drain the oil. I'm going to have to drain the coolant system. I think step one's going to be getting all these seats out. I get the seats out, put them in the back, get it all out so I can get full access to the front end, because everything's got to come off so I can get that head off. The manifolds, everything. So that's the first step. Sitting up in Max. Was hoping to get a lot more done today. Light just disappears far too quickly at this time of year. So it's only 5:30 and you can barely see anything in here. Got Max up onto the ramps to work on him. I had to take all of the seats out, so driver's seat and the passenger seat, just so you can get to the engine bay properly. So I've taken all those panels out, took the rocker cover off, and that's basically the last thing I did. I put the leads back on spark leads. Got all the spark leads back on and everything. I started it up just to see what the rocker covers were looking like, or what the rockers were looking like, I mean. All I did was spray oil everywhere. I really need more light to see what I'm doing. So odds on I won't get anything more done on this week because it's too dark by the time I get back from work. When I started it up, and this is what Scott, the mechanic, said, it just didn't sound right while it was running, while it was idling, and there's a sound in there that doesn't sound right. And I don't know whether it's something, there's maybe one of the valves have burnt out or something. A burnout valve would be much better, I think, than a cracked head, because he was basically saying it's really hard to try and find heads for this vehicle now, this motor. Whereas I think you could probably find a replacement valve for it if it's just something like that. So maybe next week. Didn't get to check in yesterday, and I've got year 12 in about 15 minutes for their class. The girl using the jarrah, she's cut up all her bottom shelves and her little top shelf pieces over here. Still needs to work on her legs, but I need to clean up the sides of those on the saw for her today, and then she'll be putting her shelf together. The student doing the table, he's got his table leg blanks cut up and has been shaping those, sanding them back a bit. The student who had only just started the other day, he got basically the carcass of his cabinet cut up with the track saw and then used the router to do just these little housing joints on the side for putting the carcass together. The girl doing the blanket box, she's got two of her frames now glued up, and her little side frames here, they'll be ready to glue up today, so she can take those ones out of the clamp, glue these up, and probably work on maybe routing out for the panels on that one. That little pile of plywood pieces, that's all the pieces of the girl who's designed her big desk. She's basically making a study desk, and she's using 3 sheets of plywood, so there's lots of little parts to it. She got all those cut up yesterday, so we'll see what they get done in the next hour, in about 10 minutes time. So after today's lesson, there was only a couple here. The student who had done these housings, he's done a through housing here for the centre part of his cabinet. We got his pieces cut to the right size down here for the sides and the centre. I'm working on all her cabinet, got a lot of her pieces sorted, organised, cut to size. Ironbark, these 2 frames have been glued up and they're fine, they're ready. 2 end frames are just here, they got glued up today. So when this little bit here, this thin leg gets attached to the wide leg of the other side, it'll make it look like there's a 60 by 60 mil leg there. This little hutch piece has been glued up, so that's just basically waiting to dry. One of the things I did was, we don't have a jointer here at school, and so I just knocked together this sled today out of whatever I could find. This little fence, these are some cabinet connectors here. The little hold down parts are what used to be part of the bit that goes on the front of a blackboard for holding the chalk and your pens and stuff. So I've got a few of those, and I just tested it out on one of the jarrah boards. So I've basically just got it set so that tighten it down. Having 3 points of contact help with these, and this is the edge that I just jointed, so when it was finished through the saw, this side's along the fence of the saw, this is where the blade is. I set the blade so it's going to run right along there. Does a nice clean cut along, and then I can flip that around and run this rough sawn side through regularly. That student has a number of boards that we thickness top and bottom, but the sides were still rough, and you can't basically just run along the fence along. So I just tested that out and that works. So I've done one side of one board. We'll get to the rest a bit later. And I think I could probably end up trying to put a few more of these in, so some of these are a bit closer, just in case you've got a really short board that you want to run through. This is the long piece of the aluminium that I used. I just cut a few bits off it.
There's Year 12's formwork. Had to add some extra bits down on the low end of the slab because it's going to be deeper, so they did that. Some of the Rio's in there ready to be placed, and it's all pegged and screwed. A bit more work next week.